At the spring fish fry, my aunt scanned me and said, "This deck's for family only." My mom sipped her iced tea and added, "You made your choice." By dessert, half the chairs were empty, and so was the fund I'd been managing. I guess I should have seen it coming. The cold silences, the side-eye jokes, the way every family dinner made me feel like a guest in my own bloodline. My name is Andrew. I'm 34 years old, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina, an hour from the town I grew up in and the people I used to call my family. Growing up, I was always the different one. Not wild, not rebellious, just unwilling to play the game. If I didn't nod along with my dad's tough love speeches or laugh at my aunt's digs about my quiet little job, I was labeled ungrateful, sensitive, difficult. My cousins who followed the path, family business, church on Sundays, smile at the right people, were golden. I was tolerated. So, 5 years ago, I moved out of the tight circle. Quietly. No big speech, no fight, no meltdown. I packed up my rented duplex and signed a lease in Asheville. I started my own civil engineering consulting firm and, brick by brick, built a life that felt like mine. My apartment overlooked the Blue Ridge Mountains. My mornings started with silence, not judgment. My friends didn't ask why I wasn't married yet or why I never came home for Sunday dinner. They just let me be. Of course, my family noticed the distance, and they didn't take it well. The invitations to birthdays and barbecues started arriving late or not at all. Thanksgiving turned into, "Hey, we're keeping it small this year." When they did invite me, it felt like an obligation, a pity RSVP sent just to say they tried. No warmth, no real inclusion. I'd show up with a bottle of wine and leave 2 hours later with a stomach full of food and a heart full of frostbite. Still, I did what I thought was right. There's an old land development fund, a family cooperative set up by my grandfather decades ago. Everyone in the family contributes. It's meant to help build generational wealth, buying and holding property until it's developed or sold. Most people dipped into it for loans, withdrawals, expenses. I never did. Not once. But I kept contributing. Every month, like clockwork, a percentage of my firm's profits went into that fund. No one thanked me. No one acknowledged it. I didn't even have my name listed on the public-facing documents anymore. But I was still a co-administrator. My grandfather had made sure of that before he passed. Quiet power. The kind they forgot I had. Sometimes I wondered why I kept paying into something that treated me like a ghost. But part of me held on to the idea that maybe, my family would see it one day. That I wasn't the problem. That I had only ever wanted peace. Instead, they acted like I'd burned the family home down. Like my silence was a betrayal. I hadn't slammed the door. I'd just stepped outside. But they made it clear, you're either in the circle or you're nothing. So I stayed gone. Built my life. Watched from afar as weddings happened, babies were born, and Christmas cards stopped arriving. I worked. I hiked. I kept my head down. That was my escape, quiet and clean. But the thing about distance is, eventually, it gives you perspective. And what I saw, what I started to understand, was that their version of love had always come with a leash. And I had finally cut it. It was Maria who convinced me to go. She was one of the few I still talked to, my cousin, a few years younger, the kind of person who actually listened when you spoke. "It's just a fish fry," she said over the phone. "Aunt Evelyn's hosting it, but don't let that stop you. I'll be there. Come on, Drew. It'll be good to see you." Against my better judgment, I said yes. It had been nearly a year since I saw most of them in person. The last Christmas invite I got was a generic EV that landed in my spam folder. No one followed up. No one noticed when I didn't show. Still, I showed up that Saturday in April. I brought a bottle of local wine and a handmade wooden serving board I picked up from a craftsman in Black Mountain. It was the kind of thing Aunt Evelyn would pretend to love, then quietly re-gift to someone who mattered more. The yard was full when I pulled up, kids running around barefoot, someone setting up cornhole, the smell of fried catfish and hush puppies hanging in the air. I saw Maria near the back deck and gave her a little wave. She smiled big and walked over to hug me. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "Seriously, it means a lot." I nodded, feeling a little better. I spotted a few other cousins, Daniel, Jolene, even Chelsea. Some gave half-hearted waves. Others just looked through me like I was a +1 nobody remembered inviting. Aunt Evelyn came out of the kitchen door, drying her hands on a towel, her smile freezing the moment she saw me. "Oh, Andrew." Her voice dipped like she'd just remembered a chore she forgot to do. "Well, we weren't expecting you, but grab a plate, I guess." I held up the wine and cutting board. "Brought a little something." She glanced at them and motioned vaguely toward the folding table. "Just put it over there." Maria tried to bridge the awkwardness. "He brought that amazing blackberry wine I was telling you about." "That's nice, honey," Aunt Evelyn cut in. "Anyway, Andrew, the kids are on the lawn and the main deck is for family only, so you'll probably be more comfortable around the side table." I blinked. The main deck is for family only? She smiled like a dentist about to drill. You made your choice when you moved out, didn't you? My throat went dry. A few heads turned toward us. My mother, seated comfortably at the main table, lifted her cup of sweet tea and said without looking at me, "You're always welcome to visit, Andrew, but you can't have it both ways. We don't do halfway family." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My heart was hammering, and for a second, I felt like a kid again, like I had to explain myself, defend my right to be there. But I didn't. I just placed the wine and board on the side table and turned around. I walked toward the driveway. Quiet, dignified, but each step felt heavier than the last. Then I heard footsteps behind me. "Drew, wait." "Maria?" She caught up and touched my arm. "I'm sorry. God, that was awful." "It's fine," I said, trying to swallow the heat in my chest. "Really? It's not fine," Daniel said, joining us. I heard what she said. That was cruel. Then Chelsea came, her arms folded, jaw tight. "That's it. I'm done pretending this is normal." Within 5 minutes, 6 cousins followed me out. Some silent, some angry, all of them done with the charade. Maria looked back at the backyard and shook her head. "They think you're the problem. But they're the ones who need everything to stay fake." We stood in the gravel driveway for a while, just breathing, none of us really knowing what to say. And in that silence, I felt something shift. They may have pushed me out of the circle, but I wasn't the only one who saw it for what it was anymore. Back at home, I didn't say much to anyone for a couple days. I went to work. I ate dinner alone. I answered emails, and I pretended that what happened at that fish fry didn't sting the way it did. But it did. Something about hearing my mother say, "We don't do halfway family," kept replaying in my head like a splinter I couldn't pull out. And it wasn't just what she said, it was how sure she sounded. Like I'd broken some sacred rule by choosing my own peace. Sunday afternoon, I sat on the back porch, staring out at the ridgeline with a cup of cold coffee in my hand. My phone buzzed on the patio table. A voicemail from my uncle. I didn't even listen to it. I could already hear the tone, half concern, half condescension. I opened my email. Another message from Aunt Evelyn. No subject line. Just one sentence. "Don't turn your back on your family just because you're in your feelings." I closed it without responding. Instead, I logged into the portal that managed the family's land development cooperative, the fund my grandfather started over 50 years ago. It was tucked inside a shared trust, overseen by a local bank, with co-administrative access granted to me and Uncle Henry. They thought I'd forgotten, that I'd checked out years ago, but I still had the password, and I still got the quarterly reports. What I hadn't done, until now, was really look. I pulled up the ledger and scrolled back 5 years. Dozens of withdrawals, some flagged as educational expenses, others under medical hardship. The amounts weren't small. $6,500, dental procedure, urgent. $3,200, therapy for Chelsea's son. Except I knew from Chelsea herself that she never received a dime from the fund. Then came the ones labeled land management expenses, spa treatments at a mountain resort, landscaping invoices for houses I knew weren't part of the trust, even a pool installation with health recovery in the memo line. I sat back in my chair, blinking at the screen. This wasn't just sloppy. It was deliberate. They were bleeding the fund, and they thought no one would notice because no one ever looked. Except I did. I opened a new tab and pulled up the contact page for the trust officer at the bank. I drafted a formal request to freeze all current and future disbursements. I cited unclear withdrawal justifications and potential misuse of shared legacy assets. Then I requested a full independent audit, attaching documentation of the most questionable transactions. At the bottom of the form, under signature authority, I typed, "Andrew R. Westbrook, co-administrator." I clicked send, and that was it. The moment, everything shifted. No yelling, no revenge speech. Just one quiet click that closed a chapter and opened a whole new one. They wanted to make me feel like I wasn't part of the family. Fine, but I was still part of the legacy. And now I was going to protect it, even if it meant protecting it from them. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. By Monday evening, my phone was lighting up like a slot machine. Missed calls from Uncle Henry. A group text from Westbrook family trustees. Half a dozen emails marked urgent. I didn't answer any of them. I read every frantic line. "Henry, why are the funds frozen? You had no right to make that decision without a family vote." "Aunt Evelyn, this is vindictive. Your grandfather would be ashamed of you." "Mom, you're embarrassing this family. It's bad enough you distanced yourself. Now you want to make us look corrupt?" No one asked why I froze the account. They just assumed it was about revenge. It wasn't. It was about boundaries, the one thing this family had never respected. I sat on my couch, calm, laptop open in front of me. While they raged, I was busy sorting through digital records. emails from the trust bank, notarized documents from Grandpa's original fund charter, and a scanned PDF that made my stomach turn when I opened it. A deed. One I'd seen before, years ago, when my grandfather had called me into his study just before he passed. "This will be your anchor," he said, sliding the document across the desk. "One day, you'll need something that's yours. Something no one can take." I had filed it away, unsure if he meant it metaphorically or legally. He meant both. The deed was for the Mountain Retreat Lodge, a 10-acre family property in Jackson County, used for reunions, birthdays, and strategy weekends, where the elders played puppet masters behind closed doors. I thought it belonged to the family jointly. Turns out, it didn't. The ownership had quietly been transferred into my name 6 years ago, signed, witnessed, and recorded. Grandpa's final move. A silent insurance policy in case the wolves ever turned on each other. Well, they had. I spent the next 2 hours drafting a formal notice. All access to the Westbrook Lodge is revoked until further notice. No gatherings, rentals, or events are permitted without express written permission from the owner. I attached a copy of the deed, highlighted the registration date, and ended the message with a brief line. Andrew R., Westbrook, owner. Then I sent it to my mother. Just her. Let her decide how fast it spread. By the next morning, the fire had caught. Emails came in rapid succession. "Evelyn, you can't do this. That lodge is for the family. It's tradition. Henry, we need to talk immediately. We have events scheduled for July. Mom, your grandfather left that place to all of us in spirit, even if not in name. You're crossing a line." I didn't reply. I forwarded everything to my attorney. They thought freezing the fund was a power move. They didn't realize I still had the breaker switch. The lodge had been their safe space, their symbol of control. And now, it was mine. I opened the messages from Maria and Daniel. Short but telling. Maria, "Good. About time someone cut the cord." Daniel, "Just say the word if you want help. Proud of you, man." And for the first time in months, I exhaled without tension in my chest. They wanted to call me a traitor? Let them. I wasn't burning bridges. I was locking the vault. They didn't lose access because I was angry. They lost access because they never thought I'd read the fine print. But I had. And this time, I was the one holding the keys. By Wednesday, the tone had changed. Gone was the righteous fury. Now it was all strategy and calculation. You could hear it in the messages, clipped, formal, like I was a business partner instead of their flesh and blood. Maria came by the office unannounced around noon. I was surprised to see her. She looked tired, phone in hand, lips pressed tight. "They're calling a family meeting," she said, dropping into the guest chair across from my desk. "Emergency session. Tonight. 6 p.m. at Uncle Henry's." I didn't have to ask what it was about. "They're trying to vote you out," she added. "Out of the fund. Out of the trust. They think if they show unity, they can override you somehow." I didn't respond right away. I just leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Maria tapped her phone. "Henry called me twice this morning. Said if we want to preserve the family name, we need to act like a unit." "And by unit," I said quietly, "he means fall in line." She nodded. "They think you're bluffing." I reached for my laptop, opened my inbox, and found the draft I'd been working on since Monday night. It was already done, just waiting for the right moment. "I'm not going," I said. Maria raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Very." She nodded again, stood up, and squeezed my shoulder gently. "Do what you have to do." After she left, I sat in silence for a long time, just listening to the hum of the HVAC unit and the buzz of my phone, texts I didn't open, voicemails I didn't play. Then, at exactly 5:59 p.m., I hit send. The email went out to all 32 members of the Westbrook Family Trust. Subject: Revised Charter for Westbrook Land Development Fund. Attachments: Legal restructure. Final. PDF. The new charter was written in clean, precise legal language. I'd gone through it with my attorney line by line. It included a formal restructuring of the cooperative fund to require dual administrator approvals for all withdrawals, a mandatory quarterly audit by a third-party accounting firm, a new policy that tied fund access to behavioral clauses. Any member found guilty of fraud, manipulation, or misuse would be disqualified permanently from benefit or control. A legacy protection clause that stated, contributors who have never withdrawn from the fund shall retain full administrative veto power, effective immediately. Guess who fit that definition? At the bottom, I wrote only one sentence. These changes take effect immediately. Then I signed it. Andrew R. Westbrook, co-administrator and primary contributor. While they sat in Henry's living room, passing around sweet tea and whispering about strategy, I rewrote the rules. No shouting, no confrontation, just paper, power, and quiet defiance. My phone started vibrating a few minutes later. First one call, then 3, then 10. I didn't answer. I stepped outside, sat on my porch with a glass of bourbon, and watched the sun dip behind the hills. Somewhere an owl called out. Somewhere else, my family was realizing they'd lost the game before they even knew it started. I didn't burn the house down. I just changed the locks. And now they were stuck on the porch, knocking, shouting, demanding. But I was already inside, and the door wasn't opening. The next morning, it all came crashing down. My voicemail was full before I'd even finished my coffee. Aunt Evelyn, you are out of your depth, Andrew. This is bigger than you. You're throwing away decades of tradition. Uncle Henry, you think this is over? It's not. We're exploring legal options. My mother, I don't even recognize you anymore. This cruelty, this power trip. You've embarrassed us. You've embarrassed yourself. And that was just before noon. My phone buzzed nonstop. Text messages, calls, social media tags. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly very interested in reminding me how family doesn't do this to each other. Funny, none of them had said a word when I was being shut out, dismissed, quietly erased. I didn't respond to a single one. Let them spin. Let them scream into the void. I had done what needed to be done. I spent the day working like any other, drafting reports, reviewing plans, taking a video call with a client building a sustainable subdivision near Boone. The world kept turning, no matter how loud the Westbrooks got. Later that evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer in hand, watching the sky shift from gray to gold. That's when my phone lit up with a message from Maria. Maria, they're losing it. Evelyn's trying to rally signatures, but no one's listening anymore. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. A minute later, another text came in. Daniel, I read the charter. Honestly, man, it's brilliant. You've restored the meaning to that fund. For the first time, it feels real. I smiled. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me why I did all this. Not for revenge. Not for applause. For clarity. For truth. Of course, not everyone had something to say. My sister, for one, remained silent. Not a word since the email. She was one of the quiet beneficiaries who'd used the fund like a slush account. I checked the audit logs. Her name was all over the past 3 years. Dental, emergencies, luxury flight reimbursements, a suspicious charity donation to her own event planning firm. She had gone dark, like a fugitive hiding in plain sight. She knew what the audit would show. My mother, though, she didn't go silent. She doubled down. That evening I got another voicemail, her third of the day. You think this makes you strong? You think cutting people off makes you a leader? All you've done is rip this family apart. For what? So you can feel important? She paused, then added softly, this isn't the son I raised. I let the message finish. I didn't delete it. I didn't respond. Because she was right. I wasn't the son she raised. I was something new. Someone who didn't apologize for being different. Someone who didn't bend to guilt or tradition. Someone who had finally drawn the line, and meant it. Not everyone can be saved. And I wasn't going to chase the ones who wanted me small, silent, and under control. Let the firestorm rage. Let the voices rise. I wasn't answering. I was watching. And for the first time in my life, I felt at peace doing absolutely nothing at all. It was a Thursday when she showed up. I heard the knock before I saw her. Not hard or angry, just persistent. 3 quick raps, then silence. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. My mother stood on the porch in a pale blue sweater and perfectly pressed slacks, the same ones she wore to church or funerals. Her hair was pinned back like she was expecting company. Like this wasn't just a visit, it was a performance. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. Hi, she said, almost too gently. I was in the area. I said nothing. She smiled tightly. Can I come in? No, I said. We can talk out here. Her lips twitched, the tiniest flicker of annoyance, but she nodded. Fine. We stood in silence for a moment, just the sound of wind rustling through the porch railing. She looked past me, into the house, then back at my face. I want to talk, she said. Without all the noise. Without the emails. Just us. I leaned against the doorframe. I'm listening. She sighed. Look, Andrew. I know things got out of hand. There's been a lot of confusion, misunderstandings, hurt feelings. But you freezing the fund and locking the lodge, that felt like an ambush. It wasn't an ambush, I said flatly. It was a response. To what? I blinked. To being told I wasn't family. To being humiliated on a porch like a stranger. To being erased unless my money was involved. Her expression tightened. Oh, don't be dramatic. No one erased you. You told me I made my choice when I moved out. Evelyn said the main deck was for family only. You watched it happen. You didn't flinch. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I didn't want to escalate things, she muttered finally. No, I said. You just wanted me quiet. She shook her head, her voice rising just slightly. That's not fair. You've always been sensitive. You take everything so personally. And you never take responsibility, I said. You've built your whole life around pretending nothing's wrong, as long as the picture looks good. She stepped back, stung. That's not true, isn't it? I asked. Every time I didn't fit the image, when I didn't show up in a suit, when I didn't stay quiet at dinner, when I stopped playing along, I became the problem. Not once did you ask why I left. Not once did you say, "Are you okay?" It was just silence. You distanced yourself, she snapped. You shut everyone out. I protected myself, I said. There's a difference. Her eyes searched mine. This isn't who you are. I straightened. No, it's who I've always been. You just never liked him. We stood there, the weight of years between us. She reached out, fingers grazing the edge of the doorframe. I miss you, she said quietly. I miss the idea of you, I replied. Her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. This doesn't have to be the end. No, I said gently. But it is the boundary. She nodded slowly, like she was finally understanding something too big to argue with. Her voice faltered. I thought you'd come back. Eventually. You always did. I met her gaze. That's because I thought love meant shrinking. But it doesn't. Not anymore. There was nothing left to say. She turned and walked down the steps, slow and stiff, like the weight of her own denial had finally begun to crack her posture. I closed the door behind her. Not with malice. Not with triumph. With peace. Because for once, I didn't need to fix it. And that was the most honest thing I'd ever done. The audit wrapped up 3 weeks later. The findings were worse than I expected. Over 40% of the fund's disbursements in the past decade had no valid documentation. Several withdrawals were marked with false pretenses, labeled property maintenance, but routed to personal checking accounts. One entry said legal fees for family dispute, and turned out to be for a divorce lawyer for my cousin Melanie. When the report hit the inboxes, there was radio silence from half the family. No defense. No outrage. Just silence, the kind that meant they knew. But something else happened too. The other half, the quieter ones, the overlooked ones, started reaching out. People like Daniel, who had always kept his head down, who rarely got a say in anything. Maria, of course, stayed vocal. She asked to step up. I want to help, she said. Not just to support you, to rebuild this right. We made her co-trustee within a week. The new version of the fund looked nothing like the old one. The website was redesigned from scratch. Applications now required full transparency, documentation, and community benefit. We added categories for things that actually mattered: education, emergency medical costs, startup grants, housing repairs for elders. And this time it worked. Daniel submitted a proposal for his eco-design business, modular greenhouses built for underserved communities. The fund backed him for $20,000, and within a month, his first pilot greenhouse was up and running. Chelsea, who had once been caught in the middle of the family politics, sent in her own audit. She had used the fund for therapy for her son, and she backed it up with receipts. She wasn't hiding. She was proud. We approved an extension for continued care. Maria helped build out a mentorship program, pairing young family members with professionals in our circle. Not just lawyers and executives, but artists, social workers, community planners. No hierarchy. Just help. The mountain lodge? That took longer. At first, I kept it locked. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I needed time to clear the space, both physically and emotionally. I hired a crew to clean it up, fix what had been neglected for years. I walked through every room, touching the furniture my grandfather once built by hand. I opened the windows and let the air roll in. Then, one Sunday, I reopened it. Not with a party, not with a ribbon, just an email. The Westbrook Lodge is open again. Requests for use may be submitted through the fund portal. Respect is required. Access is not a given. The first request came from Daniel. He wanted to host a weekend retreat for local students studying architecture and sustainable design. Approved. Later that month, Maria requested a 3-day stay to organize scanned family archives, letters, photos, and original trust documents. Also approved. Others didn't ask. They just disappeared. Some relatives removed themselves from the mailing list. Others lurked, waiting to see if the old order would return. It didn't. And slowly, the group that remained began to look less like a family by blood and more like a family by choice. People who showed up. People who owned their history. People who gave as much as they took. We didn't fix the legacy. We rebuilt it from the ground up. And this time, it had a foundation that would last. It was late summer when I found myself back at the lake. The same lake where we used to have bonfires as kids, where Grandpa taught me to skip rocks and gut fish and sit still without saying a word. It hadn't changed much. Same cracked wooden dock, same smell of damp pine and old rope. The kind of place you don't visit to escape something, but to understand it. I sat at the edge of the dock, legs dangling over the water, barefoot, jeans rolled up to the ankles. The surface rippled beneath my toes. I stared out at the tree line and let the silence do its work. There was no noise from the lodge. No shouting matches inside. No power plays happening in the kitchen. Just wind and water and the occasional chirp of some bird I couldn't name. I pulled out my phone and checked the fund dashboard, not out of anxiety, just habit. 2 new requests pending. One was a housing repair for Aunt Liza, who'd stayed neutral through everything but sent me a handwritten thank you last week. The other was from a young cousin I barely knew, applying for college aid with a beautifully written letter about wanting to be the first in his branch of the family to get a degree. I smiled. Then a new text came in. It was from Maria. Just a photo. Daniel and a few cousins sitting on the lodge deck, laughing over a board game, sunlight catching the tops of their heads. Below it, one line. Feels like it's ours now. I put the phone down beside me. She was right. It didn't belong to everyone anymore, not in the old way. It belonged to the people who respected what it stood for, who didn't treat legacy like a trophy, who showed up when it mattered. The water lapped gently against the dock. I leaned back on my palms and let my eyes drift up to the sky. No guilt, no bitterness, just stillness. I thought of Grandpa then, his quiet ways, the way he never said much but always saw everything. I understood now. The fund, the lodge, the hidden deed, it wasn't just about preserving land. It was about protecting something more fragile. Integrity. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight alone. I didn't need to be the fixer, the silent financier, the overlooked peacekeeper. The people who stayed were walking beside me now. I opened my eyes, picked up my phone, and stood. There was still work to do, applications to review, policies to improve, a future to shape. But the burden was lighter. Because now, I wasn't carrying a family. I was building one.